Welcome to the deep dive. You've shared some really fascinating research today, and we're going to explore how a new AI model is tackling the pretty complex challenge of identifying brain tumors in MRI scans.
Yeah, it's a critical area.
Absolutely. And this isn't just about, finding something. It feels like a foundational step that could really improve how clinicians diagnose, understand, maybe even plan treatment.
And that's the goal.
So our mission for this deep dive is to get a handle on how this specific model, Swin UNETR, uses some pretty cutting-edge transformer technology to potentially shake things up.
That's right. The study details this novel approach using Swin transformers. And, we talk about brain tumor segmentation. It's a crucial process, really has far-reaching implications.
Right.
Getting that accurate identification from MRI isn't just like seeing the tumor. It allows for precise measurements over time, tracking growth,
Okay.
detailed volumetric analysis, super important for surgical planning, and maybe down the line, it can even help predict how patients might respond.
Okay, so let's get a sense of the landscape here, because brain tumor sounds like one thing, but the paper mentions over 120 different types. That's a lot.
It is huge variety. Plus, you have primary tumors starting in the brain and secondary ones that have, spread from elsewhere.
Metastatic, right?
Exactly. And even within those primary ones, like gliomas, you've got different grades, some slow growing, some really aggressive.
So a massively diverse problem.
Absolutely. And that's precisely why MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, is such a powerful tool.
Uh-huh.
The study highlights 4 key MRI modalities they typically use. T1 with contrast, that's T1C, where gadolinium highlights active regions T2, and FLR.
Right, I saw those mentioned.
Yeah, each one gives us a slightly different window, different perspective on the brain tissue and how the tumor is affecting it. Think of it like different camera filters revealing different details.
Okay, that makes sense. So we have all this incredible detail from these different scans, but actually going through and manually drawing the tumor boundaries, that sounds incredibly time-consuming.
Oh, it is. Extremely.
Yeah.
And potentially subjective, The different experts might draw slightly different lines.
Yeah, you get variability. So that's where the need for automated segmentation really comes in, isn't it? An AI that can just consistently, accurately map these regions. That'd be a leap.
Exactly. And for a while now, deep learning, particularly using fully convolutional neural networks, FCNNs, or just CNNs more broadly, they've been sort of the go-to.
They've had success.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Especially network designs with that characteristic U-shape. They've achieved some really impressive results in segmenting brain tumors automatically.
And here's where the new research comes in. It points out a limitation, right? Something about a restricted kernel size.
Precisely. The kernel is like the small window the network looks through as it scans the image. Because it's relatively small, these CNNs are great at local details, fine textures, but they can struggle to grasp the overall structure, the long-range relationships across the whole MRI scan.
That feels like a big deal when you've got tumors that can be really weird shapes, different sizes, maybe spread out quite a bit.
It's a significant hurdle.
Mm-hmm.
And while researchers have tried workarounds like increasing the receptive field to make the network see further,
Nice.
the effective reach for capturing those really distant connections, it's still somewhat limited. It's this difficulty with long-range dependencies that really open the door for exploring transformer models.
Transformers. Okay, yeah, we hear about them constantly with language, NLP, how they've changed translation, text generation,
Absolutely.
and now they're making waves in computer vision, too. So what's the core idea? What lets them overcome that CNN limitation?
The magic really is in a mechanism called self-attention.
Self-attention.
Yeah. Unlike CNNs processing info through those local filters, transformers excel at capturing long-range information. They do it by looking at the relationships between all pairs of elements in the input.
All pairs. So like every part of the image compared to every other part.
Essentially, yes. For image tokens, little patches of the image, this lets them build a much more complete understanding of the global context.
So it's not just seeing the pixel next door, it's understanding how a tumor bit over here might relate to something way over there.
Exactly right. And its power led to vision transformers, VITs, applying this concept directly to images. They break the image into a sequence of these tokens and analyze all the relationships.
Okay.
The paper mentions UNETR as an earlier medical imaging attempt. First, to use a VIT as the main encoder, didn't rely on CNNs, and it showed, good initial promise.
Right, a stepping stone.
Yeah.
So how does Swin UNETR build on that? What's the key innovation here?
The central idea in Swin UNETR is using a specific type of transformer, a Swin transformer, as the encoder, the main feature extractor, but still within that U-shaped network design.
Okay, Swin transformer. Different from a standard vision transformer.
Yes. Swin transformers are hierarchical, and they introduce a much more efficient way to calculate self-attention. They use this clever technique called shifted window partitioning.
Shifted windows.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. Why is that the big improvement?
Well, regular VITs can be computationally really heavy, calculating attention across all tokens globally. Swin transformers are smarter about it. They first divide the image into smaller, non-overlapping windows.
Right.
Self-attention is then calculated within those individual windows. Much faster.
But doesn't that lose the long-range view again, if you're only looking inside small windows?
That's where the shifted part comes in. In the next layer, the boundaries of these windows are shifted slightly.
Shifted. Ow.
Usually by half the window size in each dimension. This shift means that parts of the image that were in separate windows in the layer before are now together in the same window in this new layer.
Okay. So information can flow across those old boundaries. You get cross-window communication. Exactly. It allows connections and information flow across what were separate regions. So the model efficiently gets both the fine details within a local window and the broader context across the image through these shifted interactions. Plus, the hierarchical structure means it extracts features at multiple scales, which is really valuable.
That makes a lot of sense. Kind of the best of both worlds. Efficiency from the windows, but still getting that crucial long-range understanding through the shifting and the transformer backbone.
And you mentioned the U-shaped design is still there, like the older FCNNs.
Yes, exactly. That proven UNET structure. The Swin transformer encoder doing its multi-scale feature extraction is connected to a CNN-based decoder.
The part that builds the segmentation map back up.
Right. And they're connected at different resolution levels using skip connections.
Skip connections. Remind me what they do again.
Think of them as direct highways. They let information from the earlier, higher resolution layers of the encoder bypass the deeper layers and feed directly into the corresponding layers of the decoder.
Why is that helpful? It helps the decoder retain those really fine, granular details from the early stages, the sharp edges, the small structure that might otherwise get kind of smoothed out or lost during all the processing in the deeper parts of the encoder.
Got it. So encoder uses Swin to understand the what and where at different zoom levels. Decoder uses that plus the skipped fine details to draw the final precise map.
That's a great way to put it.
The paper also mentioned reformulating this as a sequence-to-sequence prediction. How does that apply here?
Essentially, the input that 3D multimodal MRI data, the 4 channels, is treated as one long sequence of data points.
Instead of like a 3D block.
Well, it is a 3D block, but it's projected or flattened into a 1D sequence for the transformer to process. This lets the transformer architecture view the entire 3D volume and understand the interplay between the different MRI modalities, T1, T1C, etc., in a sort of unified way.
Okay, not just slice by slice.
Right. A more holistic view, which can lead to a better understanding of the tumor's full characteristics and boundaries.
Okay, great overview. Let's maybe dive into some of the nuts and bolts now. How Swin UNETR actually works. It starts with those 3D multimodal MRIs. First step in the encoder.
The very first step is patch partitioning. The 3D volume gets divided into small, non-overlapping cubes, like dicing an onion.
Okay, tiny blocks.
These patches become the basic units, the tokens basically, that form the input sequence and are used to build the windows for self-attention.
Like the puzzle pieces. And then comes this shifted windowing mechanism. You mentioned regular windows, WMSA in one layer, then shifted windows, SWMSA the next, shifting by half the size, Y alternate.
That alternation is really the key to enabling that cross-window communication efficiently. In a layer with regular windows, WMSA, attention only happens inside each window.
Right, contained.
Then, by shifting the window grid in the next layer, SWMSA, you create overlaps. Tokens that were in separate windows before are now forced into the same window because of the shift.
Ah, so now they can interact. They can attend to each other.
Precisely. It creates connections across the grid, lets information flow more globally, but without the massive computational cost of calculating attention between every single patch across the entire volume in every layer.
Yeah.
It's clever. And SWMSA is the shifted one, WMSA is the regular window.
Very clever.
Yeah.
Like slightly different viewpoints, revealing hidden connections. And inside these windows, regular or shifted, are transformer blocks. What's in those?
So each block typically has the core attention module, that window or shifted window multi-head self-attention part. That's where the relationship understanding happens.
Okay.
Then there's usually layer normalization, which just helps stabilize training, makes things learn more smoothly. And a multi-layer perceptron, or MLP, basically a small, standard neural network that processes the features further. These components work together in each block to refine the feature representations.
And the paper also talked about this hierarchical structure. 4 encoder stages, patch merging layers. How does that create the multi-scale features?
Right. So as the data flows through these stages in the encoder, the patch merging layers step in. Their job is to reduce the spatial resolution, make the image representation smaller, but at the same time, increase the number of features, the channel dimension.
So fewer, bigger pixels, but each one knows more.
Kinda, yeah. Imagine starting with an input size HXWXD. After stage 1, maybe it's H2 by W2 by D2, but with more feature channels. This repeats. You get these feature maps at increasingly coarser resolutions, but they capture more abstract, higher-level patterns.
That multi-scale view seems critical for tumors of different sizes.
Incredibly valuable, yes.
And all these features from all the different scales in the encoder get piped over to the CNN-based decoder through those skip connections. What's the decoder doing with all that?
The decoder essentially reverses the process. It takes the features from the encoder at various resolutions and gradually upsamples them, bringing the representation back to the original input size. It uses components like residual blocks with convolutions and instance normalization to refine the features during this upsampling. And it uses deconvolution layers to actually increase the resolution.
And it's combining the coarse, abstract info from deep in the encoder with the fine details from the shallow layers via the skip connections.
Exactly. That combination allows it to generate a final segmentation map that's both accurate in terms of the overall tumor shape and precise about the fine boundaries.
And that final output isn't just one mask, right? It has 3 channels.
Correct. One for the enhancing tumor region, ET, one for the whole tumor, WT, and one for the tumor core, TC.
So it's differentiating these clinically important subregions.
Absolutely. These regions have different biological characteristics and are vital for diagnosis, planning radiotherapy, surgery, and tracking how the tumor changes. Getting those individual components is much more informative.
Okay, fantastic. Now the big question, how well does it actually work? The paper talks about the BRATSAT 2021 challenge. What is BRATS, for people who might not know?
BRATS, the Multimodal Brain Tumor Segmentation Challenge. It's basically the Olympics for brain tumor segmentation algorithms.
Ah, okay. The big leagues.
Yeah, it's the benchmark.
Yeah.
Provides a large, standardized data set of multi-institutional MRI scans, all carefully annotated by expert radiologists. If you want to prove your model works, you test it on BRATS.
And Swin UNETR participated in 2021. How did it do?
It performed extremely well. In the validation phase, it ranked among the very top approaches submitted.
Wow, okay. And how did it compare directly to some of the previous winners or strong contenders?
Yeah.
You mentioned SegresNet and UNET TransBTS.
Right. They did a detailed comparison using 5-fold cross-validation on the training data. And Swin UNETR came out on top. It achieved higher average dice scores. That's a key metric for segmentation accuracy for all 3 subregions.
Higher than those other established methods.
Yep. Compared to the others, the average dice improvement was about 0.7% for enhancing tumor, 0.6% for whole tumor, and 0.4% for tumor core.
Now, those percentages sound kind of small.
They do. But in a field this competitive, on a benchmark like BRATS where scores are already very high, those kinds of consistent gains across all categories are actually quite significant. It shows a real edge.
And the researchers think this edge comes from the Swin transformer's ability to learn both local and global context better.
That's their main conclusion, yes.
Yeah.
That combination of multi-scale, contextual information and modeling the long-range dependencies. They did note UNET and SegresNet were still very competitive, strong performers. But interestingly, TransBTS, which is also transformer-based, didn't do quite as well.
Why was that, do they think?
The authors suggest TransBTS's limitation might be how it used the transformer. It was mainly used in the bottleneck, some standalone block, without that deep integration across multiple scales like Swin UNETR has with its U-shape and skip connections, feeding features at different resolutions.
So the architecture integrating the transformer matters as much as the transformer itself.
It seems so, how it's woven into the network fabric.
Okay, and then on the official BRATS 2021 validation dataset, the hidden one used for ranking the scores were really solid, right? Like 0.858 dice for ET, 0.926 for WT, 0.885 for TC.
Extremely strong scores, yes. And crucially, the Hausdorff distances were also low.
Hausdorff distance. That measures boundary accuracy, doesn't it? Like how far off the predicted surface is from the real one.
Exactly. Low Hausdorff means the predicted shape was very close to the ground truth shape, not just getting the overall volume right, very precise spatially.
So highly accurate and precise.
Yes. And the authors emphasized this performance, put them right at the top among, I think, over 2,000 submissions, and significantly the first transformer-based model to be that competitive on BRATs.
That's a milestone.
Definitely. They also reported results on the final testing dataset, which were still very strong, nearly identical for WT and ET, though there was a slight dip for the tumor core region. Still, top-tier performance overall.
And just quickly on the training side, they use things like soft ice loss, PyTorch, and MONAI, which are popular libraries.
Standard tools, yeah. MNAI is particularly great for medical imaging AI.
Right. Trained on NVIDIA GPUs, use data augmentation like flipping and scaling,
Right.
crop the images. Pretty standard stuff there.
Mostly standard practice for state-of-the-art deep learning, yes. Things like learning rate schedules, batch sizes, number of epochs, sliding window inference during testing, all pretty typical for getting the best performance out of these complex models.
And they used an ensemble, right? Combined 10 models.
Yes,
Yeah.
their final submitted results came from averaging the predictions of 10 different Swin UNETR models trained across 2 separate cross-validation runs. That's a common technique to boost robustness and eke out a bit more accuracy. Reduces the impact of any single model's quirks.
Okay. So wrapping this all up, this deep dive into Swin UNETR really paints a picture of a pretty exciting step forward for automatically segmenting brain tumors.
I'd say so.
Using that Swin transformer power within the proven UNET structure seems to be pushing the limits of what's possible in terms of accuracy on these tough MRI scans.
Absolutely. Hitting state-of-the-art or very near it on a benchmark as challenging as BRAT's really underscores the potential here. It shows these hierarchical transformer models have, serious promise for a medical image analysis.
And that leads perfectly into our final thought for you, our listener. Given how well Swin UNETR performed here, what other really tricky medical imaging tasks could benefit from this kind of approach? Models that can really grasp both the tiny details and the big picture, the long-range context, maybe looking at other organs, other diseases.
Lots of possibility.
Definitely. And thinking bigger picture, what does the wider use of these kinds of sophisticated AI tools mean for the future? For diagnosis, for planning treatments, maybe even for patient outcomes down the road? It's certainly a lot to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.